the main challenge that I faced was actually within myself. And I realized like I want to grow this company, but I haven't really worked on myself, right? I always say that denial kills progress. I think that one of the things people really have to do is be real with themselves.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of Secrets to Silent Success. Today we have the one and only Bri'Ann Stevens. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing so good. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Awesome. So let's jump into it. So you're the founder and CEO of Foundation First. Tell me a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so I actually co-founded it with my best friend. So it's interesting that you said your producer is your best friend.
Yeah.
Because, you know, going into business with a friend is always complicated. It can either go really, really well or it can be really tricky.
Sure.
And so going into it, we were really skeptical at first, but we worked really well with other projects. So prior to launching Foundation First, I had an organization for women. And we were interviewing so many women, like monthly, maybe 30 women a month. So just imagine.
Wow.
And so the company grew really fast because a lot of people were finding out about my platform. Like, who is this woman who's reaching out to these dope, amazing women? And as it grew, I got offered a radio show. And I met my business partner, Clark. She was actually my first guest. My team found her and they were like, oh, she has a teen girl organization. Bree, you would love this. We connected. And I would say immediately, but you know how with social media, you'll say, oh yeah, let's link up, and you never do. But like maybe a month or two after, we finally got together, and it was like magic. Like we were bouncing ideas off of each other, everything. And so there I started business advising, and there was a client who was coming to me for certain services, going to her for different services. And in my head, I was saying, if you would have just told me you needed that, I would have hit my best friend up and probably got you a discount with the package I'm already giving you. But because you're going to us separately, you're getting charged full prices from the two of us, and we didn't even know it. Until one day we realized, hey, we have the same client, and she spent almost like over $1,500 between the two of us for just a few services. And so we said, what if we just merge our services together and launch something called Foundation First for people like her who need business advising, who need the logo, who need the website, who need photography. Some people need it all.
The whole
and
thing
so
from the branding.
We came together. We were in my mother's living room. I remember like it was yesterday. And we said, people need a solid foundation. Like they need that first. And she said, well, Foundation First. And I think right after that, we wrote our business plan. We went and did everything that we needed to do legally. And it was an instant boom. As soon as we posted, this is what we were doing and who we were in the community, we got clients immediately. And it went from maybe 1 to 2 clients a month to 200 projects a month.
Wow.
So we were working on maybe 50 to 60 projects a week. It grew really quickly, and so
So that's amazing to go from 1 or 2 clients to having 50, 60 projects in a week's time. So that's the boom. That's the good, shiny part of entrepreneurship that you see on social media, but there's challenges as well, right? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced in your entrepreneurship journey, especially from the standpoint of being a Black woman. What are some challenges that you face in the entrepreneurial world?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna be straight up with you. The main challenge that I faced was actually within myself. You know, Black women, Black people in general, but I'm just gonna talk about Black women, we aren't always given the tools that we need to handle conflict, to handle failure, to handle the struggle. We're just taught to figure it out. We're just taught to fight. And so sometimes that can be delivered real aggressive. And I think it's a good thing to be assertive. It's a different thing when you're aggressive. And I realized like I want to grow this company, but I haven't really worked on myself, right? And I think a lot of times when you become a business owner, you forget that you are your brand. If you don't have someone taking on customer service, you are taking on customer service. And so when clients become frustrating or they just get like out of pocket, you still have to maintain a level of professionalism, a level of like decorum where you say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but and this is how we can figure it out versus just going crazy. I think the first challenge was within myself. It was a point in the beginning where we were actually losing clients, and I'm 100% sure it had to do with the fact that we couldn't handle everything that was coming our way. Because again, when you think 50 projects a month for people who are a week from people who just had maybe 2 to 3 a month, it was a big boom. So on top of me trying to work on myself personally, it's people, where is my project? When can you get this done? When can you get that done? you were already working on my logo. Can you just add 2 or 3 things onto that and have it done next week? So just imagine 200 people, or not 200 people, 200 projects. But imagine, let's say it was probably maybe half of that, 100 people, just, you know, screaming at you, almost saying so many different things. And not everything was negative. It was just like, you know, a high demand. And so I'm anxious. I'm angry, I'm frustrated. So the biggest challenge for me was within myself, and that's what I tell a lot of people who I work with today. Like, that you are your brand. Like, how well are you internally? Like, do you know how to breathe? You know, do you know how to do these things? Because how can you expect your clients to come to you and have that level of peace, and you don't know how to have that level of peace? And so now when clients are anxious, like, I'm doing this conference, I need this. It's like, okay, well, let's plan this out. I know how to handle you now because I've realized how to handle myself. And the other thing was money. We weren't always, so when we only had a few clients a month, we almost closed down, ceased everything with Foundation First. There was one point where we had $20 collectively in our business account. $20 for 2 grown women in our business account. And I did not know what was going on. And I remember just praying. I remember asking God, like, what is this? Like, we're doing everything we're supposed to do. And that, again, the first thing he showed me was my customer service. Like, people are coming, but you want people to refer. You want them to come back. So I worked on that. And maybe 2 or 3 months later, as I worked on that, and as we also changed our offer, it's like, how can we elevate the experience? Like, you got your logo. Let's talk about a logo mark. Let's talk about a logo suite. So how can we elevate this experience versus just having quick services? So that was something else. We had to figure out how to add value to our clients. And I think a few months later, we made, it was like 5,000. Then maybe a month after that, it was 10,000. It just, everything, a month, it just started to like double and triple. And so, and I truly believe that once we, again, figured out our attitude, and again, I think that's a lot of Black women's story, and we have reason to be angry. There's just, but you have to have the tools to know how to deal with the anger.
And so I was gonna, want to dive deeper. You're talking about correcting the attitude, fixing the customer service. What tools did you use? What are some applications that someone who may be struggling with that can go and implement tomorrow to get on that journey of having better customer service?
I think the main thing is, I would honestly say and I believe it's so interesting because I believe Jonathan put that in there. I always say that denial kills progress. I think that one of the things people really have to do is be real with themselves. And sometimes that means asking people close to you, what do you look like? And that's humility, because you're my cousin, you're my sister, you're my mom. How dare you tell me that I have this that's wrong with me? But most times, the people closest to you see your blind self. We all have a blind self. There's a known self, there's an unknown self, and then there's a completely blind self that I learned through my life coach. And so sometimes you have to ask people who you trust, because not everybody is, some people do just want to kind of be a hater. But there are some people who love you enough to say, hey, this is what I've noticed. I noticed that you have a sense of maybe of arrogance. I noticed that you have an ego. I noticed that I noticed that you curse a lot. I noticed that you do X, Y, and Z. And so going to people like my mother, who I trust, who's also my life coach, going to my cousins and different people, those are things that they pointed out. Bree, sometimes you can be condescending and it can come off. Oh, okay. Bree, sometimes you can do this. So I stopped cursing. I don't curse at all. I don't care if you cut me off on the road. I will not curse, because certain things will just carry over. We think that we can control it, but it's like, no, whoever you are in private is who you'll show up as in public. And so I believe that's one of the first steps, is get with people who you can trust, who could tell you about yourself, and you just take it as constructive criticism, because we want to be better. We want to be well. So if you want to progress, I believe that's the first thing. I guess I said it too. Get a life coach, get a therapist, because they can give you the tools so that you can kind of fix those things about yourself. So that's what worked for me.
I think what was interesting in the application of those tools was the desire to want to be better. And I have a lot of business questions, but hey, we on the personal track now, right? Because I don't think you can have the business right if you don't have the personal right. And so one of the things that you said was the desire to want to be better. I know from our research that, hey, you were, going out partying, giving your body away, the drinking, the smoking, things like that. And then you were like, nah, I got to get it together. I got to get my mindset right. I got to want to be better. When did that mindset shift change to want to be better?
When I was on the brink of death, I overdosed actually on sleeping pills. So a lot of times we don't want to change our lives until it's life or death. And it sucks because why does it have to get that far? Life will always give you different signs. God will always give you different signs before the worst of the worst happens. And for me, it was overdosing on sleeping pills. And I always tell people it's not necessarily that I wanted to be off of this earth. I know there are some people who have that story and that struggle, and I've been there before too. In high school, where you like, I don't even know if I can live anymore. That wasn't the case for me at 22. For me, I just wanted to sleep. Sometimes life is just so hard. You just want to sleep. I'm just like, I just want to sleep, and I'm okay if it's for a day, God. But guys, it don't work like that. If you take that many sleeping pills to sleep for a day, you might not ever wake up again. Yeah. And so I took, and it was over the counter. It wasn't over the counter medicine. It was prescribed medicine. Yeah. My friend, her mother, she has a lot of back pain, so she had strong things, and we had the bottle, and so I'm just popping these pills like clockwork, and I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move. My body was literally trying to throw it up and get it out of me. Things that you see on TV, on movies, that was happening to my body. So I was overdosing. And I was kicked out of my mom's house at the time because I was a party girl. I was stealing from her. I was into a lot of the party scenes, so drugs, weed, ecstasy, cocaine. I wanted that life. I thought I wanted to be, like in that kind of scene, but I really wasn't happy. I had a lot of friends in that life, but I really wasn't happy. And in order to keep my friends, I wanted to be that girl. Like, when the rappers came to the city and they wanted the girl who could bring the girls out, I was okay with being that girl because I thought that's what was going to keep my circle. And that was what kept my circle, because as soon as I overdosed, my mom let me come back home. I fasted for 30 days, so I locked myself in my room. I listened to a different type of music. I deleted my social media accounts. I literally just became one with myself. And when I did return to the world, I didn't have any friends. The one friend that I had, I think I had just met her at it was like an organization. So that is what happened. And I think a lot of people are scared to change because they're scared of what they might lose. But I'm glad I lost it, because who I was able to become and what I was able to gain was that much more better. Yeah. And it didn't take years. Literally, after 30 days after I overdosed, I literally made a decision in those days that I want to be someone new. And so a few months later, God gave me my vision for my first company. A few months later, I got offered the radio show. A few months later, after that, I started Foundation First, and my life just elevated. And then there's a lot of people. I have text messages from girls who are still in that life in Miami doing things, long paragraphs. Bree, how did you go from that to this? Yeah. Because I see the change in you now. You're not even the same person. I don't think the same. I don't talk the same. I don't walk the same. And I think a lot of times women, they think that it has to be this drastic thing that happens, and it doesn't. It was drastic for me because I made silly decisions, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. Like, you can literally say, this hurts. I might lose people, but what I'm going to gain is so much more. And I think that's what I had to realize. Like, well, Bree, you want a different type of friend. Yeah. You want a different type of thing. And one of my good friends, Fritz, he would always say that I always knew you were different, because when it was just he and I would want to listen to the Nina Simone, and I would just want to sit around and paint with him, and I would just want to write poetry, and I would just want to do the things. And he would always say, when you're just with me, you're one way, but when you're with other people, you're a different way. Yeah. And I realized once I cut that out, I was someone totally new. All I did was paint. All I did was go to the museum. I realized, Bree, you don't want to listen to that kind of stuff all the time anyway. Yeah. But again, I was young. I was 22, so that's what you're supposed to be doing at that age. And sure. I realized, no, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. A question that we necessarily hadn't discussed prior, but I think would be interesting to ask is, how do you stay consistent and persevere? Because one thing, once you change or you redefine what gratifies you, that doesn't mean that those things go away, or those temptations go away, or those calls don't happen. They're still there. So I think, this is just my opinion, like changing is, in my opinion, a little easier than staying consistent with the change.
Ooh, right? That's a word.
So tell me, how do you stay on the straight and narrow even when every single day there's going to be temptations to revert back to where you were?
Yeah, so I have a lot of triggers. I'm big on my faith. That's the first thing, but I also have a lot of triggers. And so you have to change your triggers. So like when my alarm goes off in the morning, it tells me to be thankful. Like naturally, I have that written, be thankful. Sometimes I think at 2:00 a scripture, it has a scripture there so I can remember to repeat that scripture out loud. And then, so you just have to change your influences. What do you have around you that might trigger you? In those first 30 days, like I said, I deleted my social media. If social media is triggering you, maybe get off of the apps for a while. Or if you have to delete that old page and start over new, do that. So instead of having the party girls as people who I'm following, I deleted my page and I started following people who I'm inspired by. I started listening to the Tony Robbins. I started listening to the Eric Thomas. I started listening to Sarah Jakes. I started listening to Tony Evans. So my following changed too. So I feel like the triggers, like what is around you that's triggering you, and is it triggering you to be better or to be worse? Yeah. And so I wanted my triggers to be positive. Like if I get on social media and Eric Thomas is screaming at me, get up, get it done. That's a trigger, but it's gonna trigger a positive thing in me versus the negative. So that's really the main thing. Change your triggers, because every day is gonna be hard, and you already have to deal with life. Life already has a lot of negative triggers. So if your home can be a space for positive triggers, you're just building up that stamina. You're building up your cup. And one thing that my life coach, Tiffany Rowe, says is, like, what's in your cup is for you. I think a lot of times people fill up their cup so that they have a lot to give. And it's like, no, that's for you. What overflows is for everything else. So I believe that if you have to take a minute to stay away from the world, even if it's for 30 days like me, do it. I think people are scared of isolation, but fill your cup so that it's overflowing, so that when people are like, hey, let's go out and do this. Hey, you want to smoke this? Hey, you want to hit this? You filled yourself with other things so much so that it's overflowing to where it can't pull out of you. Or even if it does pull from you, your cup was overflowed. So you're not empty to where you have to take those substances or take those influences. So I would say your triggers, and really being in a sense of isolation. And again, your triggers could be what you're listening to, what you're watching, what you're seeing on social media, the time you're going to sleep, the time you wake up. What are you watching before you go to bed? You know, like there are certain movies I just can't watch at a certain time because it triggers certain things.
Sure. Yeah, when you give me the cup analogy, I hear fulfillment. And I know that was one of the things that you talked about. Hey, when I'm popping this, hitting this, drinking this, that's because I'm unfulfilled and I'm trying to fill that void with something that's negative. What was the search like? I know you talked about having being revealed to that first business. What was the search like and the discovery like of finding things that fulfill you?
Yeah. So like I said, I didn't even realize, I've always wrote poetry since I was a kid, but I stopped because, again, when I started to be this party girl, that didn't entice my friends. And I noticed that early on when I would ask certain people like, hey, let's go to the museum, let's do this. It was a no. It's like, hey, such and such is in Houston at this club, let's go. And it's like, okay. So I just stopped inviting my friends there, and I didn't have a car. So I'm really inviting you because I need a ride. But, you know, but if you don't want to do those things with me, I felt like I couldn't, do those things anymore. And so, again, after I spent those 30 days with myself, I discovered different things. I wanted to paint more. I wanted to write more. So everything that I already was doing from the time I was a kid, it's like I just brought it back. So I think that's cool too. I think a lot of times adults, we forget what it's like to be childlike. And that's not always a bad thing to have those things. So I had to remember, like, well, Bri, what did you like as a kid? And so I brought back my poetry. That was a big thing for me because shortly after I moved back home, my mom, I got offered to perform in front of 500 people. Wow. So I wrote a poem that I still perform to this day because people love it. And after writing that, I realized I want to be in this industry. I want to be a poet. I want to do all those things. And it was just so hard for me to get the opportunity. And so I said, I'm going to create a platform for poets. I'm going to create a platform. You have it for rappers, for singers. You have Spotify, you have Apple. I said, let's do something for just poets. And I was like, what's going to entice people to come on a website and just read poetry? And I was thinking, like, well, maybe if we're sharing people's stories, people will come to read this interview. But have you ever been on Forbes and you go to the Forbes website and sometimes a quote will pop up? I triggered it to where when you came to our website, a poem popped up. So you have to read this poem from this new poet, but then you can go read an interview from, I don't know, Miss USA at the time, because we were interviewing some dope women, and that's how Pink Productions actually came to be. A lot of people don't know that. I just wanted to get my poetry out there, and shortly after, when it grew so fast, it was like, okay, wait, hold on, forget poetry, let's do this. And then after that, it was like, well, forget that, let's start hosting events. So I started doing conferences. That's something else. I think a lot of people are scared to pivot. Your first idea might not be the idea that you end up with, but it's going to take you to the next space. And I think that I'm a master pivoter, and I think you have to be successful.
Absolutely.
And so it was poetry, then it was interviews, then it was events, and now it's branding, and it's just like it all just flowed for me. So that's actually how it started.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said two things. You talked about going up there and giving a poem in front of 500 people. You also talked about being a master pivoter. I think we have some things in common in that regards, the professional speaking, and then also the pivoting. Hey, I'm a media production guy, but I'm definitely pivoting to be more of the content creation, professional speaking guy as well. I would ask you about your professional speaking journey. What has that been like? Where does that passion come from, and what are you trying to impart into your audiences?
Yeah, so that passion, my whole life, my family has told me I talk too much and I talk too fast. And growing up, I would just laugh it off like, oh, it is what it is. And then at one point, it became an insecurity. Because I'm like, okay, do I talk too much? Do I talk too fast? And when I rediscovered myself, I was like, Bri'Ann, you actually like to talk. And you actually like to talk about things that you're passionate about. And the things that you're passionate about is actually life-changing. And so people will come to me for advice. People would always come to me for a good word. And again, because I do so much, it was always hard to get with everybody one-on-one. So I said, I just want to start speaking to people in larger groups. And so I started to go to like TSU, U of H, and sharing my story, because I believe that age, because that's what it was for me, that 18, 19, when I started drinking and smoking, that's like an age where it's kind of like a make or break, because you go from being a kid to going to college, and here are all the influences. And so I wanted to speak to those girls like, hey, like, what do you want to be in this world? And they would like share those stories, and I would say, but where are you right now? And a lot of them, I'm going to say almost 95% of them were so stuck, so lost, so traumatized by things from their past. But they're like, but I want to have my own hair salon one day. I want to be the CEO of this company one day. I want to be in finance one day. I want to be in business. But it's just hard right now because I don't have a good relationship with my mom, or I'm struggling in school here. I'm doing this there. So I realized I needed to go into spaces and remind people that they have the power to make their dreams come true. But that's going to mean cutting out some things right now. And so my passion came from that, from realizing that I have something important to say, and there's an audience that needs to hear that, because I don't want people to have to go through an overdose. So if I can get you to find your healing now, to find your fulfillment now, without all of that, that's what I wanted to do. And so I started speaking at colleges. I started speaking at my own conferences, my own events. And quickly, I just noticed that people really were encouraged by my story and what I had to say. And so I'm really passionate about healing people through storytelling, and through giving wellness tips and resources, and entrepreneurship. I think like having your own thing that you're passionate about is a really big, you know how when you grow up, how can I say this, how some parents keep their kids in sports or extracurriculum activities to keep them from doing other things. I feel like entrepreneurship is a really good avenue when you're trying to walk in your purpose or escape from those old things, because it keeps you busy. It's always growing. You always have to research. You always have to grow. So I think that if
no idle time in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you can have this 9 to 5, which is still cool, this corporate job, but if you're not fulfilled there, and if that corporate job is going to lead you to getting drunk every weekend, then maybe find something else that can fulfill your time when you go home. Instead of picking up the wine, pick up your laptop and maybe do some research. So I'm big on that with teaching women too. Like, what are you passionate about? And if you could have your own thing, what would that be? So that they're doing something else with their time.
Yeah. I do want to take it back full circle. You mentioned the quote about denial kills progress. What 2 or 3 things would you advise to someone to discover that they're in denial? That, hey, I have this 9 to 5, but I am going to get drunk every weekend. Or, hey, I am stuck or lost, like those individuals who are on a college campus. Because when we're on a college campus, a lot of us, hey, we're given all this freedom, we're given all of these responsibilities. You're 18, you are stuck and lost, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So what are 2 or 3 things for someone to discover that they are in denial so they can start to make progress?
Okay. Ooh, that's a really good question. Because I see it every day. I think the biggest thing, the biggest indicator is, and I'm going to take it to like a mental health point of view,
Sure.
is depression. I think a lot of people, you know when you're depressed. And even if you don't, you know when you're just feeling a deep sense of sadness and you're really just trying to escape it. I talk to so many women who, like, if you are in a place where when you go home and when you're just sitting with yourself, again, not on your phone, not on anything, and you feel a deep sense of unfulfillment, a deep sense of sadness, a deep sense of depression, if you don't feel fulfilled and you need other things to fill you up, then that's probably a good sense that you're in denial about where you are in your life. I know that was one of the biggest things for me. I think that when I had to have other things in my life, I knew that I was probably in denial about where I am in myself, with myself. And I also think if 2 or 3 people are saying the same thing about you, then maybe you have something to look at. And I'm not saying everything is subjective.
Sure.
But if 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 people are all saying the same thing about you, then maybe that's something you should look at. So if people are saying like, well, you complain a lot, or you're lazy in this area, or you don't take the time to do this, or you're sloppy here,
Sure.
then maybe look at those things. And I think sometimes, again, we become in denial because we don't want to believe those things about ourselves. Like, no, I'm not lazy. No, I'm not sloppy when it comes to that. But no, you probably are. No, you are late every time we have somewhere to go. That's a problem. Start showing up on time. And I think that we just don't want to hear those things about ourselves. So if someone, I believe that's a big thing, is saying the same, if a few people are saying the same thing about you, I'm sorry, it's probably you. And it's okay that it's you. It's because you want to be better. Yeah. So it's like, you know what, I am always late. What can I do to be better? Maybe I should start getting ready an hour earlier versus 30 minutes earlier, because you just want to be someone who has good qualities. You don't want everybody to say the same thing about you everywhere you go, or they're talking about you behind your back. You should want people to come to you about certain things. And so I think that you're living in denial if those two things are happening. If you feel unfulfilled when you're just by yourself, and you aren't happy, and like I said, because I talk to people who feel that way, where they say, I do sleep a lot because of X, Y, and Z. I do go out because of X, Y, and Z. I do this because of X, Y, and Z. They'll say, oh, I'm young and I'm just having fun, or I'm just doing this. But it's like, why? Yeah. What are some other things that you can do that are fun, that isn't going to cause you to be throwing up over a toilet at 2 a.m., Sure. And then again, the other thing is just, what are people saying about you? And if those things are true, even if you don't want to believe it, because that's what denial is, like, you don't believe that it's true. And don't get me wrong, truth is so subjective too. Like, if there's a box, you see this side of the box, I see this side of the box. That doesn't mean what you see isn't true. We just don't see the same thing. Yeah. And so I believe that sometimes you have to take into account that I'm seeing this side of my hand, you're seeing this side. So I have to trust what you're saying about this side because I can't see it. Yeah. And so I think that just trusting what people are saying about you might have a little truth to it. And that doesn't mean that your version isn't true. Like, maybe you're just really tired because you do have kids and you do have the husband. But on the flip side of that, if someone is calling you lazy, as sucky as that hurt, maybe consider what that is. Like, your side is true, but that side is probably true too. So how can you manage the husband? How can you manage the kids? How can you manage the company, but also show up in the areas where that person sees that you're kind of lazy or slacking? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I would ask you, last two things, right? I would ask you, when you were going to your cousin, your mom, those people that you trusted, and you were getting that criticism, how did you take it constructively in your own story? Because I know you also talked about in your business, right? Hey, my customer service wasn't the best. Maybe I did come with a chip on my shoulder or attitude on my shoulder. People were telling you that, right? Yeah. How do you not take that as an attack against you, but you take it constructively and say, hey, I can implement things to make it better? How do you not take it personal?
In the beginning, I did. In the beginning, you might. I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody's different. I took everything personally. Even recently, a client, where she's not my client right now anymore, we realized we weren't the best fit. But sometimes people say some really harsh things. And again, some of it might be true. And I also think, so let me pause there for a second. If you're hearing this and there's somebody in your head where you're like, or somebody's like, oh, I have something to say to this person. I'm ready to tell them about themselves. Because on the flip side of that, there might be someone else who thinks like they're clean. Like, I don't have nothing wrong with me, but this person got some things that we need to discuss in this area. So let me talk to that person too. Your delivery matters too. I think that it's not just about saying you struggle with X, Y, and Z, but I noticed that you do this and this is what helped me. Or this is what I read about that, because maybe something didn't help me because I don't struggle with the same thing you do, but I read about this for you. Here's an article that you can read. I think that's what constructive criticism is. There's a difference between criticism and constructive criticism. Sure. Some people want to just criticize, and that can be demeaning, that can be hurtful, that could actually set someone back. Yeah. You want to be constructive in your criticism. So you could even start off with something positive, like me and my business partner. I'm the CEO and she's the CBO, because we realized that we were literally fighting about a lot of things that we didn't have to fight about. Yeah. Like she would say, well, Bri'Ann, I wish I could be organized like you. I wish I could take initiative like you. And on the flip, I would be like, Clark, I wish I had an eye for design in the same way you did. I wish I saw colors and fonts the way that you did. I wish I saw X, Y, and Z. And so in the beginning, it was just a clashing thing because we would talk about each other. Yeah. More so like, you didn't include me on what we were changing on the website. You didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't do this. We had to change the way we talk to each other. Like, Clark, you know what? You are great at X, Y, and Z. But before you make those decisions, can you include me? Because I have a creative eye too, and I want to be included in that too. Sure. And then she would have to hear me out and say, you know what? We do have this meeting coming up. I know you're used to taking the initiative, Bri'Ann, but don't leave me out of that. I have some things I want to include in the meeting too. I know you're CEO, but we're also co-founders here. And so I think your delivery matters with how you tell someone how they're treating you or what the issues you see within themselves. So in the beginning, I was offended because not everyone had a good delivery. Sure. But again, I had to work on myself to know that whether a person has a good delivery or not, take the meat and leave the bones. Mm. They might have had a lot of ugly to say around the main point, but just focus on the main point. Yeah. So back to that client who I'm no longer working with, she sent paragraphs of things because I think there was like one or two elements that she didn't like. And I'm at a place in my career now where I can say, well, we're just not the best fit for one another. And it's not because I can't handle the criticism. I saw that part, but everything else in that was ugly. And I'm gonna treat you with the utmost respect, so I want that in return. Yeah. And I feel like when you show someone you can't be respectful, then we just might not be the best fit, you know, for one another. And so that's what happened there. So, and that was a recent thing. I got super offended. It was offensive. Yeah. Some things are offensive, and it's okay to be offended, but just not to act in that offense. Mm. You get what I'm trying to say? Like if someone walks up to me on the street and they just start cursing me out, I might get offended, but I don't have to respond to that. Yeah. And so I think there's just a way how you respond, but so you might get offended. That's just gonna be honest. It's no perfect way to say like every time someone tells me about myself, I just take it. No, sometimes I am like, no, what? Yeah. Hold on. And then I have to sit with myself and say, well, Bree, you have done that 3 or 4 times. Maybe you should watch that. Maybe, especially when it came to condescending. When people told me I was condescending, I almost wanted to fight everybody who said about me, because I'm like, I love people. I'm women empowerment. I'm feminist. I can't condescend people. And they're like, no, you have a tone where you come off like you're better than sometimes. And it hurt me because that's not me. Yeah. But multiple people told me that about myself. So I had to check that and say, well, what is that? And I had to realize it was from childhood, feeling like I have to tell you that because so many people counted me out. It's like, no, I'm going to tell you I can get it done. I can do it. But I realized that it turned from me feeling that way towards family to me actually doing that in my business, you know? And so I had to learn that, like, well, Bree, why do you come off like that to people? And where does that stem from? Yeah. And understand that everybody's not your enemy. Yeah. And so I guess that would be good advice. Like, know that if someone's giving you constructive criticism, that they are not your enemy. Yeah. They want the best for you. Yeah, they want the best for you. And and if you get offended the first time, don't take that as like a sign to just give up, like, oh, I'm never gonna ask nobody, you know, to tell me about myself because that was too hard for me, you know. Maybe the first time it will be a lot for you to hear those things about yourself, but just keep trying it because ultimately it's gonna make you better. Yeah. The last question before the last question. So 2 more questions I got for you. One of the things that I like
to ask a lot of my guests. There is a fable story quote that says you can take a mule to the water, but you can't make the mule drink, right? And I know you're a professional speaker. You're going out there trying to help as many people as possible. I believe in doing the same thing, right? What is your belief system and what are your practices when it comes to getting others to implement the advice, the wisdom that you're giving to them? How do you make the mule drink the water? And what do you do if that mule refuses to drink the water?
My biggest thing, I said this a few times this week, you could tell a tree by its fruit. And that means that if I see you and you tell me you're an orange tree, but apples are falling from that tree, no, you're not an orange tree, you're an apple tree. And so I believe the main thing in that, and by that I mean, you can, again, my fruit is going to show who I am. You can't tell anybody to be something that you're not being. And so if I'm telling people that I'm this new person, that I can take constructive criticism, that I'm well, I have good business practices, I have good customer services, but nothing I have shows for it, if none of my fruit shows that that's who I am, then they're going to see that and say, well, that's not really who you are because I saw you doing this the other day. Yeah. So how can you come and tell me to be a better person and you don't look like the better person? Yeah. So I believe the main way to make a mule drink is be the mule that needs to drink. Yeah. I think that a lot of speakers, a lot of people who are in this industry, they aren't really about what they say they're about. And so I think, and it seems a lot of the things I've been talking about today is self-awareness, which is interesting. But I think the main thing is to be self-aware for your own self. How can I tell you what to do if I won't do it? So drink the water for yourself, so that people can see that it's not bad. It's actually healthy for you, because if I'm a mule and I'm drinking the water, and it's actually making me stronger, it's actually hydrating me, it's actually giving me energy, it's actually giving me strength. If you're this mule that's down on your luck, depressed, sad, you're gonna be like, wait, hold up. She drank that water and that made her do this. Let me do the same thing. And so I think you really have to be about what you say you're about, and not just on social media. If you see me, I don't know, at a bar or at church or at a speaking engagement, I want you to be able to say the same person I saw on social media is who she is. She wasn't rude to her waitress. She was kind. She was nice. She spoke to me. Be about what you say, who you say you are, about, like, show those practices, be those practices, so that other people can see that this is okay, this is what I want to be, especially in business. And that's why I said, when I had a bunch of clients who weren't good business leaders coming to me, in the beginning I was like, she's rude, how is she going to be a business leader and she's doing this? Or how is she going to do X, Y, and Z and she's doing this? How are you going to launch this conference in a week? And then I realized, well, Bree, you launched an event in a week. Did you do? So be about what you're trying to teach other people to be. I believe in that when they see your fruit, they'll want to grow their own tree and create their own fruit.
I love it. You talk about basically leading by example, if you will. And I thought it was interesting. You were like, the whole podcast has been about self-awareness. It was a speaker that I was watching, and he was like, me speaking is just my self-therapy. Right? I'm only telling you stuff I need to do for myself. That's how I'm doing it.
No, seriously.
It's just self-therapy. Well, the last thing I got for you, this is called the Secrets of Silent Success podcast. So I would ask Bri'Ann, what is your secret to success?
The main thing is pivot. Be okay with pivoting. I know that we have ideas and things that we think is going to be our make or break moment, our big ticket thing. And then when life isn't panning out that way, sometimes we are scared to pivot and try something new because we believe like this has to work. So I believe, again, a big secret to success is knowing how to pivot and knowing when to pivot. Sometimes, like, for instance, when we had $20 in our account, I thought that meant pivot because I'm broke. So no, that's a pivot sign to me, but it wasn't. It was a sign for me to change my business practices, to add value to my customers, to learn how to scale my business. It went from, because it's not a hobby anymore. You're now a business owner. So knowing when to pivot, knowing how to pivot, and not being afraid of pivoting is a huge secret to success. Think about anyone in the industry who you consider successful. What they started doing is not what they're doing now.
Absolutely.
So that would be the main thing. And then I believe, stop complaining. We don't realize that when we complain, we have something called synapses in our brain, and we're killing those bridges. And so I tell people literally, complaining kills connection. In your brain, literally, is killing connection. You're training yourself to complain because you're something is happening in your brain when you're complaining. Like, you're teaching yourself how to do it, and it happens literally. If I'm complaining over and over and over about how a person is not doing X, Y, and Z, I'm most likely killing the connection to the thing I want to happen. Yep. And so I believe that if you can get to a place in your life where you do not complain, and something else too, and stop being around people who complain. If I complain to you over 30 minutes, Micah, I'm now doing the same thing to your brain as I'm doing to mine. People don't realize that. Get away from people who complain a lot too. That is also something that's most likely killing your success because you don't even realize it. You just listen to somebody complain 30 minutes about what's happening in their business or what's happening over here in their family. Now you're complaining about what's happening in your business or what's happening in your family. And so I believe that's another secret to success. And if you want to know how to do that, anytime something frustrating happens, again, I say don't even let 30 minutes hit, but if you have to set a timer, get it out for 10, 15 minutes, talk to someone about it, and then go into solution mode. This happened, okay, now what? Yep. What can I do? How can I be better? You know what, I did miss this deadline with my client. I did have to reschedule this. This did, suck, but what can I do to make this better? Yep. You know what, client X, Y, and Z, I apologize for doing what I did. How about we give you a free thing? You don't have to overanalyze or complain and say, well, this only happened because what she did or my iPad did this. You're just teaching yourself to complain. Just figure out what the solution can be and then move forward from that thing. Even just Friday, my business partner and I, we had a team meeting and I did the meeting agenda, but again, she was frustrated that I didn't include her in that. And it became this thing for like 2 or 3 hours. And mind you, we've been in business for 5 years. Why are we still fighting about that? But I'm so big on just getting it done. It's that sometimes, and again, because I'm CEO and I know it has to get done, I'm like, well, we both see the calendar. We both saw it had to get done. Why am I going to come talk to you about it when I can just do it? So in my head, I'm being a good business partner because I'm getting it done for us. But in her head, I wasn't including her. Yeah. And so I believe that, and we complained for a while, for 2 or 3 hours before we finally said, wait. In addition to putting the meetings on the agenda, let's actually start planning out when we're going to plan these together. I hear you, heard. Yeah. You hear me, heard. Yeah. Because in my head, it's on the calendar, but the planning of it wasn't. Yeah. So, instead of complaining for that long time, just figure out what the solution can be so that you can ultimately be better and you won't train your brain to do that all the time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, no, it was great. We'll leave it right there.
Okay.
Cool. We'll do it again sometime. I appreciate you.
Thank you.